There are few video game franchises that manage to grab hold of an audience for decades, keeping fans coming back again and again with each release. Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda continues to be one of those franchises, and the man largely responsible for that is Eiji Aonuma. Serving as designer, director, and producer throughout the series, Aonuma began work on the Zelda series with Ocarina of Time. The game offered a rare set of problems to tackle. Not only was it one of the first to utilize an open world, it was also one of the first to take advantage of all three dimensions. Aonuma was tasked with adapting the mechanics of Zelda from 2D to 3D while maintaining the style and feel of the games. Not only that, but he also had the burden of educating a generation of gamers who had been playing video games in 2 dimensions to maneuver in 3. To do this, Aonuma and his team implement a number of tools to assist and guide players through this unknown territory. The first, which became a hallmark of the Zelda series, was Z-targeting. In previous Zelda games, thanks to the top-down perspective, players were always aware of the position of enemies. In Ocarina of Time, which uses a third-person perspective, the player can only see what's in front of Link. To avoid making an obstacle out of the camera, Z-targeting would allow players to instantly lock onto a target, forcing the camera to immediately focus on the nearest threat. Z-targeting was also the solution to adapting the combat mechanics from 2D to 3. Before, Link could only aim in 4 directions, which made using abilities simple. Now, Link has a full 360 degrees of motion. Adapting previous mechanics around the lock-on functionality of Z-targeting gave the designers a clear goal to work with. Next, the team implemented Navi, a character in the game which Link can call upon at any time. Appropriately named, Navi provides the player with guidance information so that they can never get lost. Keeping players on track was a priority for Aonuma, as he never wanted them to feel intimidated by the open world. Rather than implementing a navigation function through the UI, Aonuma introduced Navi as a character that would serve the same purpose, but without breaking immersion. The entire game is designed to keep players on a path, going out of its way to ensure players don't get confused or disheartened by the massive world. Most content was locked behind story progression, creating a situation where players would have to visit and complete certain zones before being able to move on to the next. While giving the illusion of an open world, the game is actually played in a very linear fashion. This all goes back to the idea that Aonuma had to teach gamers to play in a 3-dimensional open world. Ultimately, Ocarina of Time became the bridge over the gap between 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional games. Jump forward 19 years and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild releases. If Ocarina of Time was a game designed so that players would never get lost, Breath of the Wild bets on it. There was no longer a need to hold players' hands. Aonuma decided to take the series in a new direction. Instead of designing a path and tools to keep players on it, Aonuma gave players the platform and tools to make their own path. The emphasis this time around was on freedom and, surprisingly, physics. During the development process, Aonuma had the developers create a 2D prototype of Breath of the Wild. They would implement simplified design ideas into the 2D version before executing them with complexity in the main game. Similar to Ocarina of Time, this was a process of adapting 2D to 3D. Doing this allowed the developers to test how fun a mechanic was at its core and then build off of it. One of the ideas tested this way was allowing every object in the world to interact with and affect other objects. The developers found this concept to be so fun that it became the main mechanic they designed around in the Breath of the Wild. To accomplish a sense of freedom, the game was designed so that it could be completed in any order. The player is given all available tools at the beginning, which allows them to proceed through all of the content. Nothing is locked away. If the player wishes to do so, they can go straight to the final boss immediately after finishing the game's introduction. Having said that, the game features a sprawling world. Aonuma wanted to instill in players their own urge to explore it. Aonuma had his team work around the triangle rule when designing the world. Using triangles does 2 things. It offers players choice as to whether they want to go over or around the triangle, while also obscuring the player's view from content behind it. Triangular shaped structures would also allow the developers to gradually reveal the content behind it. If they ever wanted to completely hide content, then they would use rectangular shaped structures instead. The team also worked around the concept they called gravity. Structures with varying degrees of importance and visibility would be placed in particular areas to lead players in different directions, allowing them to get sidetracked. Again, the emphasis here is on players having the freedom to get lost and explore. Everything in the game is designed to promote those urges. Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild are two very different games. With the former, Aonuma was set out to teach and guide the player. With the latter, he aimed to give players freedom. While different techniques were used to reach these two goals, the early development process for Breath of the Wild very much resembles that of Ocarina of Time. Both involved a process of adapting from 2D to 3D. Breath of the Wild is the first step into something new, and fans are eager to see where Aonuma takes the series next.